Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second meeting for 2021 of the Justice Committee. We have no apologies this morning, and our public business this morning is consideration of a range of matters of secondary legislation, starting with the criminal legal aid and advice and assistance, counter-terrorism and border security Scotland regulations 2021. And I refer members to the relevant papers in our pack. And I welcome the Cabinet Secretary for Justice and his officials to the meeting this morning, and I invite the Cabinet Secretary, if he wishes, to make a brief opening statement on this instrument, and I'll then invite any questions from members. Good morning, Cabinet Secretary.
Good morning, Convener. I hope you and all committee members are safe and keeping well, and thanks for the opportunity to come to speak to you on a range of SSIs in relation to the criminal legal aid and advice and assistance amended regulations. I thank you for the chance to speak very briefly. These regulations have been brought forward further to the introduction of legislation by the UK Parliament, the Counter-Terrorism and Border Security Act 2019. The 2019 Act introduces powers to stop, question and detain individuals at a port or border area in order to determine whether they are or indeed have been involved in hostile activity on behalf of or in the interests of a state other than the UK. The instrument will provide that non-means tested criminal advice and assistance may be available to a person detained under the provisions of the 2019 Act. It will also provide that non-means tested criminal advice and assistance can be made available for any person who has a right under Section 32 of the Criminal Justice Act 2016 to have a solicitor present at interview. Currently, this right is disapplied by the 2016 Act for terrorism offences under the Terrorism Act 2000. This instrument will provide that in Scotland, all detentions can engage the provision of free criminal advice and assistance while in custody, regardless of the reasons for detention and interview. Without these regulations, a person detained in connection with a relatively minor offence could access non-means tested advice and assistance from a solicitor, whereas a person detained under suspicion of terrorism-related offences could not. The introduction of these regulations ensure that access to justice is available to all and legal representation is available in these cases and provides mechanisms for payment from the Legal Aid Fund for the provision of such services. That hopefully gives you a brief overview of the regulations in the context, and of course, as always, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That's a very helpful overview of what these regulations do and are intended to do. Can I invite any questions from members of the committee to the Cabinet Secretary relating to this instrument, please? No member is indicating that they have any questions to ask Cabinet Secretary, so I think we can move on to the next item of our business, which is formal consideration of this instrument and consideration of the motion in relation to it. The Delegated Powers and Law Reform Committee has considered and reported on the instrument and had no comments to make about it. The motion will be moved with opportunity for formal debate if necessary. And the motion is S5M 23568 that the Justice Committee recommends that the Criminal Legal Aid and Advice and Assistance, Counter-Terrorism and Border Security Scotland Regulations 2021 be approved, and I invite the Cabinet Secretary formally to move.
Content to formally move the motion in my name, and of course nothing else to add in terms of any points that have been raised.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. The question is that motion 23568 in the name of Humza Yousaf be approved. Are we all agreed? We are agreed. I invite the committee to agree to delegate to me the publication of a short factual report on our deliberations on this statutory instrument today, and move on to the next item of business, which is consideration of two related affirmative instruments, namely the Victims and Witnesses Scotland Act 2014 Supplementary Provisions Order 2021 and the Restitution Fund Scotland Order 2021. And again, I refer members to the relevant paper in our pack. I invite the Cabinet Secretary again to make a brief opening statement on these two instruments if he wishes, and I'll then invite any questions. Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Convener. These orders being considered today, they are to enable the implementation of a new financial penalty of a restitution order be available to courts for the offence of assault on police officers or indeed police staff. The money which is received from the restitution orders will be paid into the restitution fund This fund will then be used to provide support services for the victims of this type of assault. This support can be provided in relation to both physical and indeed mental health and wellbeing support. The powers to introduce these orders derive from the Victims and Witnesses Scotland 2014 Act, which introduced various measures to improve the support and information available to victims and witnesses of crime. To help inform the development of these orders, the Scottish Government carried out consultation with stakeholders on the operation of the Restitution Fund through a working group. This working group involved Police Scotland, police officer staff associations, police staff unions, the police treatment centres and indeed the Scottish Police Benevolent Fund. The Restitution Fund Scotland Order 2021 relates to the general operation of the Restitution Fund. Firstly, it provides for the delegation of the fund to the Scottish Police Benevolent Fund. The SPBF are a Scottish charitable incorporated organisation, and they will administer the fund on behalf of the Scottish Government. A number of options of who should be responsible for the administration of the fund was discussed by the working group, and there was agreement that the SPBF was best placed to carry out this role. They already have experience in assessing and supporting the needs of police officers and staff, and they already have existing structures in place to administer the fund effectively. Secondly, this order also makes provision for the administration of the fund, including the issuing of guidance to ministers, making payments, record keeping, or reporting back to ministers on the outcomes. This will help to ensure that the fund runs in a fair and transparent manner. In relation to the Victims and Witnesses Scotland Act 2014 Supplementary Provision Order 2021, this order makes a number of supplementary changes to the Criminal Procedures Act 1995. It provides that compensation requirements imposed as part of a community payback order are to be preferred to a restitution order when it comes to sentencing, and that compensation requirements take precedence over both a restitution order and a victim surcharge when the payments are received from an offender. It clarifies that restitution orders are a sentence for the purpose of an appeal, so that an appeal against sentence alone could be taken without requiring an appeal against a conviction. It ensures that enforcement of a restitution order and the victim surcharge will be placed on hold pending such an appeal. It clarifies that the victim surcharge and a restitution order cannot be imposed for either the same offence or different offences in the same proceedings, and it amends the definition of fine to clarify that restitution orders are a completely separate penalty. And lastly, the enforcement of fines, relevant penalty Scotland Order 2020. That order simply specifies that restitution orders are a relevant penalty for the purposes of fine enforcement rules in section 226A to section 226I of the 1995 Act, and this enables the appointment of fine enforcement officers and an application by the court to the DWP for a deduction from benefits orders. And I'm happy to leave it there, Convener, and take any questions your committee may have.
Thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary. That's very helpful. And I see Rhoda Grant would like to ask a question. So, Rhoda.
Yes, it's not so much about the order, but the fund itself. It seems to me that the fund, covering things that a good employer would cover normally for victims that had suffered injury at work, support for their physical and mental health, etc., but can't be used for direct payment to the victims. I'm wondering what the trade unions had to say when this was discussed with them, and whether they are happy with the fund.
Sorry, I maybe just lost the last part of what but I think I got the of what you were saying. So the staff unions and of course the staff associations were involved in the working group that I had mentioned. There is broad support for restitution funds. It was something that the Scottish Police Federation was one of the very first things actually that was mentioned to me in my role as Cabinet Secretary for Justice back in 2018. So it's certainly something that I know the Scottish Police Federation have supported. I should say the order does make it clear that a compensation order, which of course the money is directly paid to the victim, is preferred when it comes to sentencing outcomes. So there was support for a restitution fund. I hope that answers the members' questions.
I don't see Rhoda wanting to come back. Any other members? No other members indicated that they wish to ask a question in relation to either of these instruments. So I think we can move on to the formal consideration of these instruments. So there will be two motions. The first is motion 23601, that the Justice Committee recommends that the Victims and Witnesses Scotland Act 2014 Supplementary Provisions Order 2021 be approved, and I invite the Cabinet Secretary to move the motion.
I'm content to move motion S5M 23602 in my name.
23601, Cabinet Secretary.
Oh, forgive me. Motion S5M 23601 in my name, and also the other relevant orders in my name.
Thank you. So the question is that motion 23601 in the name of Humza Yousaf be approved. Are we all agreed? We are agreed. And the second motion, which has just been moved, is that motion 23602 is agreed. Are we all agreed? Motion 23602 in the name of Humza Yousaf. We are agreed. And again, I invite the committee to agree to delegate to me the publication of a short factual report on our deliberations of these statutory instruments today. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is consideration of a negative instrument, namely the Enforcement of Fines Relevant Penalties Scotland Order 2020. This instrument also relates to the two affirmative SSIs we have just considered, and I refer members again to the relevant papers in our pack. Do members have any comments on this SSI, the Enforcement of Fines Order? No member is indicating that they have any comments to make. Are members content not to make any comments to Parliament on this SSI? Members are content. Thank you very much. That concludes consideration of this SSI. And our final piece of public business this morning is consideration of a proposal by the Scottish Government to consent to the UK Government legislating using the powers under the European Union Withdrawal Act in relation to the UK statutory instrument proposal set out in the agenda. Members are asked to consider an SI notification from the Scottish Government on the Civil Jurisdiction and Judgments Lugano Convention 2007 Regulations 2021. And again, I refer the members to the relevant paper in our pack. As those papers note, the Scottish ministers believe that the changes in the regulations are necessary to implement the Lugano Convention in the United Kingdom. The Scottish Government says that the measures are technical in nature and are necessary to give full effect to the Convention. Members are asked to consider the SI notification covered by this note and consider whether they agree with the view of the Scottish Government that it should consent to the relevant changes made by the United Kingdom Government. May I ask, do members have any comments to make on this notification? No member has indicated that they have any comment to make. Are members content not to make any comments to Parliament? Members are content. And are members content to delegate the publication of a short factual report to me? Members are content. That concludes our consideration of this instrument, and it concludes the public part of our meeting this morning. Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary and indeed also his officials for joining us this morning? And can I say that our next meeting will be a week today on Tuesday, the 26th of January, when we expect to consider the Defamation and Malicious Publications Scotland Bill at stage 2. And I now close the public part of this meeting and we will move into private. Thank you very much.